D.H. Lawrence, a poet in the early 20th century, he wrote a poem called Self-Pity, and he said, "I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A small bird will drop frozen dead from a bough without ever having felt sorry for itself." Now that may or may not be true, but how often do scriptures invite us to learn from nature? Learn from the ant. Look at the lilies of the field. The heavens declare. Observe the snow-laden fowl. Hath pity prevailed hence? Paul, in his letter to the Hebrews, is dealing with a people that are feeling sorry for themselves. They're recently Exodus Israelites, and it's replaying itself over again. They're thinking of going back to Egypt. They're thinking of apostatizing. And he's writing them to encourage them not to do this thing. So he's addressing them, these Christians who are experiencing suffering, they're experiencing hardship, they're experiencing what Paul describes as discipline from the Lord. Their sufferings, their trials are a form of God's discipline on them. And Paul seeks to encourage them by reminding them that discipline from God is God's way of claiming them as his sons. It is God's way of receiving his sons. It marks you out. It says, "You are mine." That's what God's discipline does. Paul says this, "You have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as sons." And then he quotes Solomon from Proverbs. "My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him." Why would Solomon say this? Because we're naturally discouraged, and we naturally despise the chastening of God. But Paul, quoting Solomon, he goes on, he says this, "For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives." What does the Lord say about Paul when he's received? What does he say? He says, "I will show him how much he must suffer for my sake." Are you suffering for the name? Are you scourged because of Jesus? This is how he claims you as his own. And the word scourge that Paul uses here is the same word that's used of Christ when he's scourged in his passion, when he's whipped. This is hard discipline that God does to his own. Paul continues, "If you endure chastening, God deals with you as sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten?" That word for chastening is paideia. Comprehensive moral instruction, which includes punishment that curbs passions and forms virtue. And then Paul says, "But if you're without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons." If you aren't chastened by God, he's saying you're a bastard. You're not a son. If God doesn't chasten you, God is not claiming you as his own. You're not being received by him. So Paul's saying, take heart. If you're being chastened, you are God's. God is affirming you as his son, as his daughter. Paul continues, "Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For they, our fathers, indeed for a few days, chastened us as seemed best to them. But he, God, for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now, no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward, it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." Our Heavenly Father knows exactly how to chasten us. He says our earthly fathers, they chastened us the best they knew how, but God knows exactly how to chasten us. He knows exactly what we need. It's often places that we don't want to go, but that's precisely where God is going to go. It's precisely what he is intending to do with his sons. He strikes us, but it's not merely for punishment of infractions. It is for an end beyond mere punishment. It is for the purpose of yielding the peaceable fruit of righteousness. It makes you fully human. It makes you enjoy life the way it was meant to be enjoyed. So don't be discouraged. Don't despise God's chastening, because scourged sons are received sons. And this reminds us of our need to confess.